Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to film a story time about moving from Maryland to Texas. I am wearing my Homebody Forever long sleeve tee from my Etsy shop. So if you are interested, we can sew this on a t-shirt, a long sleeve like this is, or a sweatshirt. And I feel like it's pretty appropriate saying for right now. So today, like I said, I want to talk about moving to Texas. So a little bit of backstory so that there's some level of understanding of where I'm coming from. I grew up in Maryland, which is on the East Coast. I'll put up a map and show you where it is in case you're not from the US and you're not overly familiar. Right outside of Washington, D.C., south of New York. It's considered the mid-Atlantic, so it's sort of right in the middle. I literally just thought my hair was on fire because I could see the reflection of the candle. Okay, we're good. It's considered the mid-Atlantic, so it's sort of like if you're going north to south, it's right kind of in the middle of the country. Like I said, right, near Washington, D.C., if you're more familiar with where that is. So East Coast, it's very different from Texas in a lot of ways. And I grew up there, and I remember when I was pretty young, like 6th or 7th grade, so I don't know, maybe 11 or 12, walking to the bus stop in the early morning in the winter time, and it would just be absolutely freezing cold. And I remember distinctly standing at the bus stop and thinking, as soon as I have the chance, I am moving south. I am not going to live, I'm nervous about this candle, I'm not going to live in this cold. I just am not a winter person. I do not enjoy it. I love the snow, but I just knew. It's like, get me somewhere warm with a more mild climate. I can't stand this. So when I fast forward, when I was looking at colleges, the schools that I was looking at were all in the South. So the way that the states go, it goes Maryland and then Virginia and then North Carolina and then South Carolina and then Georgia and then Florida. So North Carolina is in the South. People sometimes think because it has the word North in it, it's in the North, but it's actually North Carolina and then South Carolina, which is why it's called North Carolina. Anyway, so I was looking at schools in North Carolina. North Carolina has a lot of excellent universities, and it would be about a 5 to 7 hour drive home depending on the traffic, which was far but reasonable. And anyway, I ended up at a school there called Elon University. It's a small private liberal arts school. I got a business marketing degree with a minor in Spanish, and I absolutely loved it. It was between, if you're familiar with the area, between Raleigh and Greensboro, and just a great fit for me. I loved it, and I loved moving south. I loved being in North Carolina. North Carolina in particular is gorgeous because that state gets all 4 seasons. So this gorgeous fall with gorgeous rich colors on the trees, and winters where you will get some snow and some ice, so it really kind of feels like winter, and then gorgeous springs with beautiful flowers, and then warm summers. And I still just love the way North Carolina weather is. It was more mild, but you would still get all 4 seasons, and I spent 4 years there while I was in university there, and I just loved it. So when I was graduating, my senior year, I was going to job fairs and applying to jobs, and I had this very kind of out of character attitude, this very open-handed attitude towards where I was going to move and end up. Now, to give a bit more context, the summer before my junior year of college, I had this wild chain of events, which I could tell in another story time, really crazy, like cool stuff. And basically I ended up working at a summer camp in Texas, and that's where I ended up meeting Riley. So I went to that summer camp, and I had such a good experience, and it was in the middle of nowhere, Texas. The closest major city was San Antonio, but it was in a tiny little town called Vanderpool, Texas. It was just adorable, and it was just really fun. I just like the best summer. I had such a good time, and I met amazing people, had great friends, all of this. Well, during my time there at camp, I met Riley, but I left that camp dating someone else. And he came to camp, and he already had a girlfriend, and she was not at the camp. She was living somewhere else. So by the end of the summer, we Riley arrived at camp already dating someone, so he was taken. And by the end of the summer, I was in a relationship with someone who I'd met at camp who lived in Texas. He lived about 25 minutes outside of Austin, Texas. So that's kind of the backstory. So senior year rolls around, and I am still dating this guy, and we'd been dating for a couple of years at that point, right? Our relationship in total lasted about 2.5 or 3 years. So I don't know exactly how long it had been, but we've been dating pretty seriously for a while, and we've been dating long distance, and you have to be pretty intentional when you're dating I was in North Carolina in school, and he was in, like I said, in Texas. So you have to be pretty intentional because you're planning times when you can see each other, and it's flying across the country and all kinds of different things. So back to senior year, I'm going to job fairs. I'm trying to find a job. I did not want to live at home for even a day. I have nothing against my family. I'm just a very independent person. I had been 5, 6, 7. I don't know exactly how far away Elon is. I don't remember anymore. I think it's about 6.5 or 7 hours away typically. Anyway, I'd been hours away for 4 years. Just was not interested in moving back home if I could help it. So I was aggressively applying to different jobs. And back to my comment about being uncharacteristically open-handed, even though I was very seriously dating someone who lived in Texas, I applied to jobs in Minneapolis, in Raleigh, North Carolina, in places in Florida, in places in Maryland, places in Virginia. I mean, I must have applied to 15 or 20 different companies all over in Colorado. I applied to a few places in Colorado because I had this sense in my heart that God had an adventure for me, and I didn't want to limit him by not applying. So I was like, if you have an adventure for me, Lord, I just had this sense that he had something exciting, ahead of me, which he did. So I applied to all these places, and I phone interviewed in places all over the country. And it was like this fun game where a lot of my friends were applying to places in their hometown, or they, wanted to stay in a certain area, and I was just applying everywhere. And it was like this fun game of like, okay, where am I going to end up? Because I really genuinely didn't know. So I interviewed seriously with a company in Raleigh, and didn't get the job. And then I interviewed seriously with a company in Baltimore, which is where I'm from. And I thought that would be a really interesting turn of events because I wasn't thinking I was going to end up in Baltimore, and I didn't end up in Baltimore. I don't remember if I didn't get the job or if I walked away because I can't imagine I would have walked away. I probably didn't get the job. And then I applied, and the furthest that I got before I actually was hired by a company was by a company out of Dallas, to work in corporate marketing for a company. And I loved the woman who I was interviewing with. I had multiple interviews with her and other people over the phone and Skype and things, and I really loved her, and I feel like we would have worked really well together. And I'll never forget when she called me. She sounded crushed when she called me, and she said, I want to hire you so badly, but her boss, she said, my boss won't let me because you have no experience. So I had internships, but I had no real world experience, and she said my boss just thinks it's going to be too difficult for someone who is so new to the industry. But she said, I would love to hire you. So I often think about, what would have happened if I had gotten that job and I would have been based in Dallas, whether I still would have met and married Riley because he would have been only 30 minutes to an hour away instead of being 3 or 4 hours away where I ended up. Anyway, all that to say, I'm interviewing with all these companies. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to end up. I don't know where I'm going to end up. And then I ended up interviewing with a tech startup out of Austin, Texas. And they were looking for an entry-level person for marketing, for corporate marketing. And I had several phone interviews and Skype interviews, and then I actually flew to Austin to interview with them in person, and really liked them, and thought I love the city of Austin. I had been once to visit friends there when I was in seventh grade, must have been my turning year when I decided I was moving south, and we visited Austin as a family, and I just loved it. So I was really, really excited about the prospect of living there. It's a very young, up and coming kind of city. It's just a cool place. So interviewed there in person over a couple of days, and then after my final interview, they called me and offered me the job. And it was a really great salary for an entry-level position, and they were very flexible with me. I interviewed with them in okay, so I graduated from Elon in late May, I think May 23rd, 24th, 25th. And then I flew to Austin to interview, I think the next week. And I moved to Texas and on 4th of July and started work on July 8th. So it was all really quickly. So if I moved home, they were really flexible with me. So I said, I need some time to lease an apartment in Austin and to get myself together if I'm going to be moving across the country. And they were very flexible, and they said, well, when can you start? And I said, could I start the first full week or the second week of July? And they said yes. So I finished up with school on I graduated from school May 25th, moved back to Baltimore. I had to move all my stuff like 8,000 times. I had to move it all out of my apartment into a truck, drive it all home to Baltimore. We moved it all into a storage unit because I didn't know if I was getting this Austin job, and my parents didn't want like a queen bed and dressers just all over their house. So we rented a storage unit, and I moved it all into a storage unit, and then I got this job, and we had to move it all from a storage unit we actually shipped it to Texas in a pod. So I moved it into a pod, and then when I got to Texas, I had to move it from a pod to a truck, and then from a truck to an apartment. Nightmare. So that's the story. So I got hired at this job, and I was obviously super excited, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like God's divine plan for me to get married to this guy, and it's just going to be so great because I'm going to be living. He was actually a year young. We were the same age. He was a couple months older than me, but he was a year below me in school. So I was graduating, moving across the country, and doing all this, and he still had one more year of school, and he went to a university in Texas. So So I'm hired in early June or something like that, and then spent just about 1 month living at home. More than enough for me. I was like, all right, get me out of here. I'm not cut out for this. So I spent a month living at home, and then moved right on down to Austin. And my mom and I made the drive in my little Honda Civic, and we left on July 3rd, and we arrived on the 4th of July. Took us 2 days to drive there. It was about 25-hour drive. I will never make that drive again unless we are driving in like some kind of RV or something. It was horrific. I do not enjoy being in the car for that long. My back hurt. I was cramped. The back of my car it had like lamps and suitcases, but it's a memory I'll never forget. So my mom and I drove to Nashville. That was the halfway point, and we stayed in a hotel in Nashville, and then we finished the drive up, and we moved and got to Austin. During that time, I had secured a lease with an apartment in Austin. There are so many things I had to do during that time. I remember I went to Target in Baltimore with my friend Olivia, and I bought like dishes and utensils for my apartment, and it was just like, here we go, like here we go. So I moved into my apartment, and that was one of the happiest days of my life. It was so happy. I had always wanted to live on my own in my own apartment and have my own space. And so it was just, I remember going to that leasing office, and this apartment was mine. I had put the money down. It was everything. It was mine. I got the key, and I went and I got into the apartment, and it was just like, it was a really nice apartment for being in Austin and being fresh out of college. And I was just so proud of myself and so excited for my future. And it was just a really special day. And I moved all my furniture in, which was not very much. It was like my parents' old couch that they were getting rid of that was like fire engine red, and my mattress from college. I would have slept on cardboard. I was just so excited to have this cute little apartment. I just loved it. So moved everything in on like July 5th and 6th, and then it was the weekend, and I drove my dad flew into Austin to meet us, and my mom and I had driven across the country. So my parents and then my boyfriend at the time, I'm going to call him James. So James was around and helping move me in and everything like that. And then my parents, it got to be the Sunday. I was going to start work on Monday, July 8th. And so that Sunday afternoon, I drove my parents to the airport to drop them off so they could fly back to Baltimore and I could start my new life. And I remember driving them and I remember driving home. And I'll never forget that feeling. It was like this bizarre, it's like the only time in my life I've really ever had that feeling. It was this feeling of endless possibility. And I felt on one hand so excited, like this is the beginning of my life. Like my life up until this point had been planned out, kindergarten through 12th grade, then I went on to 4 years of college and everything was so planned out. And now I'm like in this brand new city in my own new apartment, starting a new job tomorrow. I'm like a businesswoman and I have this endless possibilities. And like I said, on one hand, it was just like so thrilling and exciting. And on the other hand, it was terrifying. And I just remember being like, I have to start from scratch. I don't have a dentist. I don't have someone who cuts my hair. I don't have a doctor. I don't have friends. I don't have a home church. I don't even know my way to work. I don't know. I need to get a Texas license and license plate. I need to get like Texas insurance with my car. I need to get my phone plans set up, like everything. It was so overwhelming. But then on the other hand, I was super excited. So it was sort of weird. So I went to work the next morning and I was, I can put on a really good front. So like even when I'm in a really nerve-wracking situation, I have an ability to roll my shoulders back and take a deep breath and just kind of look things square in the face. This is totally like, my mom is this way and I think she really taught me this, of like sometimes you just fake it and you just roll your shoulders back and walk in with confidence and the feeling of comfort will come. And that's exactly what happened with working at this full-time job. I was the youngest person at the company by, gosh, at least a decade, if not 15, 20 years. Everyone was so much older than me, had been in the industry for so much longer. I was working with a lot of engineers because this was a tech startup and there were just a couple of other people on the marketing team. And for the most part, I liked the people I worked with. There's always a few oddballs. There were about 50 of us, so it was a pretty small company. We worked in this gorgeous office that overlooked downtown Austin and the hills of Austin, and it was just really lovely place to work, although I was in a cubicle with like walls around me squared in, and it was just like, and I was positioned, my cubicle was no doubt the most junior location because I was the most junior employee. My cubicle was right in front of the kitchen, the little break room, and so all day long I just smelled people's weird reheated foods and weird takeout that they reheated and just weird like salmon, and I just was like, oof. But I couldn't complain. I just was really excited. So that was in the beginning of July, just about. So we went through the month of July working. I went through the month of August, September, October, November, and then came December. So as I had gone through those months, I started attending a church and got into a small group there. I met some really amazing girlfriends. I joined a gym, and so I, after work most days, would go to the gym. I joined like a really nice gym that had like awesome indoor and outdoor pools and all kinds of classes, and just like one of those really nice big gyms. It's called Lifetime Fitness. It's a chain. I loved going to Lifetime. I wish there was one around here because it made going to the gym fun, because it was just like, and they even had like a spa and all this kind of stuff. So it was just really cool. So I loved going to Lifetime. And I would do that in the evenings, and I was starting to get together with friends and all these kinds of things. And so things were going pretty well, really well, actually. I had started decorating my apartment. I bought patio furniture, and I just was settling in really beautifully. And I had a couple of friends come and visit me, and I don't know that I had flown home for anything at that point. Maybe a couple of days for Thanksgiving. December is when things took a lot of turns. I do want to say though, during that time from July through December, I started really questioning my relationship with James because he was going to school a couple of hours away from Austin, but he didn't go back to school until mid or late August. And like I said, I arrived in like early July. So we had about 6 weeks together in the same city, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes apart, but we had been 30 hours apart or however many hours from North Carolina to Texas for the past like 2 years of our relationship. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're finally 20 minutes apart. This is this is amazing. So, and also I know no one. The only person I know is him. And that's not true. I knew a couple of family friends, but for all intents and purposes, the only person that I knew was him. And then my coworkers who were all much, much older than me. So I'm, of course, well, I'm saying, of course, from my perspective, my expectation was to see him during those 6 weeks before he went back to school all the time, like every day. I'm thinking we're going to spend time together and we can go out to lunch together and we can go explore the city together and go take walks together and help, buy furniture at IKEA for my apartment. And like, that's what I'm expecting. And that was not the reality. It's not what happened at all. I hardly ever saw him and I found it to be very, very odd. Like I would ask him what he was doing and he was just always like doing random things. And then I started really questioning things. I'm like, am I being really needy? But then on the other hand, I'm like, I moved across the country and I didn't move for him, but I was thrilled to be moving to the city where he was close by, right? So I just started feeling a little bit weird. I felt like it was, I just had such unmet expectations. I wasn't expecting him to bring me bouquets of flowers every day, but I was expecting to see him like most days of the week since for 6 weeks we were in the same city finally. That's just not what happened. And it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I just started kind of questioning things in our relationship. Well, then, December comes along. And so during that time, so from like August when he went back to school until like, Christmas break or whatever, he came to visit me he came home, for weekends or whatever. And then we would see each other. So like would visit me. And then one time I went to his college to visit him, one weekend. But it was awkward because he was like an RA. So I had to stay like off campus he had these friends that were girls and I was like staying in their house, but like I didn't know any of them and I was like miles away. It was just kind of awkward and that was but I understood, whatever. So December comes and my birthday's on December 9th and I never growing up had a dog ever. And that's all I ever wanted. Every year for Christmas, I wanted a dog so bad and I never had one. So for my birthday, I don't know how old I was turning then, but for my birthday on December 9th, I decided I was getting a dog. So I got Charlie on December 8th. And he was the cutest. I cannot even tell you how cute he was. Like, oh, this little fuzzy baby. He was so cute. So I got Charlie on December 8th. And then December 9th was my birthday. And my company was pretty flexible and was totally okay with us working from home like 1 day a week. And so that was a Sunday. Monday, December 9th was my birthday. And so I emailed my boss on Sunday night and said, I'm going to work from home the next day just because it was my birthday. And I thought it would be nice to work from my, home in pajamas. And so I worked all day on December 9th in pajamas. The next day I drove to my office, got up, got ready as normal. I guess my plan, You'll realize why I have a hard time remembering this in just a second. For that day, I think I had told my boss was a complete dog lover. And so I called her and said, hey, I just got a dog, a little puppy, and I can't leave him for very long. And so my office was not far. And so she was going to let me come home throughout the day to walk him and let him out on that final day. But I never needed to do that because I got to the office on December 10th, the day after my birthday, 2 days after I had gotten Charlie. And I go in there and there was this huge bouquet of flowers on my desk that my parents had sent to the office the day before for my birthday, but I hadn't been there. So I remember walking in and being delighted that there were these flowers and my coworkers had been like, yeah, happy birthday, those are beautiful. And I was like, thanks, yeah. And I sat down and got to work. And what I need to say is that, and this almost goes without saying, because this is how most people feel about their first job. It was just like, okay. I was the lowest man on the totem pole. I did everyone's grunt work. This is how it is. Like, this is how it is when you enter the corporate world. You're on the bottom of the ladder and you got to work your way up. And it was long hours and lots of computer work, and I would just sit all day and be in meetings all day, and like meetings that could have been emails all day, and just a lot of that kind of thing. And I just was like very disenchanted with the job, but I wasn't going to quit because that job allowed me the freedom of living on my own and having my own apartment and that kind of thing. So it worked out well. So I was not in love with this job by any means, but I figured I would stay there for a year or two, and then I would have some experience on my resume so that when I wanted to go ahead and transfer or, whatever, find a new job, I would have something to kind of go from. So that's kind of the story. So December 10th, a day I'll never forget. I walk into the office and I'm just starting to crunch down, get emails going and designing this and that for different flyers and brochure. I don't know what I was doing. And we get an urgent email, and it said that the marketing team is having an urgent mandatory meeting at 11 a.m. Cancel any other meetings you have. So I don't remember if I had meetings, but if I did, I canceled them, and went into the conference room at 11. And, I took a bottle of water and my notepad and my phone, just all my normal things, and just kind of walked in there and just lighthearted, and I sat down. And instantly I could see I was sitting, there was a desk, my boss's desk. We didn't go in the conference room. We went into my boss's office. Her desk, and she was sitting on that side, and then me and another woman from the marketing team was sitting on the other side, but there were a couple of people missing, and I didn't really know why, but I guess that they had gotten talked to later. So we sat down, and she said, the entire marketing team is getting laid off effective immediately, so today will be your last day. And you are going to have to pack up all of your things today. You will not be allowed to access this office. If you have anything on your computer that's important, you have I think they gave us 30 minutes, no time. You have 30 minutes to access that off of your company laptop, and you need to leave you need to leave your laptop, this, that, the other, and you're laid off, and that's that. And she said, I'm going to talk to you individually. So she sent the other woman out, and my boss talked to me first, and she was like, unfortunately, because you're so new to the company and you've only been here for 5 months, we can only offer you a 2-week severance package. I'm really sorry. I was so shocked. The only other time in my life that I've been as shocked was when I found out I was pregnant with Nora, but that was a delighted shock, and this was a devastated shock. Here I am, 5 months. Now I have a puppy that needs all of his shots. He needs vets. He needs grooming and all the expenses that come with a puppy. And I had just spent several $100s on, his kennel and his bedding and all that. I had this apartment that I had to pay rent. Rent was coming up, and I got 2 weeks severance. I understand they weren't going to give me, months of severance. I'd only been there for just a short time. But it was also, I had just relocated across the country 5 months ago for this company. Well, it turns out that with it being a startup, this is very common in startups, they were reorganizing the company and paring it way, way, way down. I think they only kept 6 employees out of 50, so nearly everyone got laid off from the company. I was not the only one that had just relocated across the country. I know there was one of my coworkers had just moved from Arizona, and there were a few from other places in the country who had just moved to Austin for this job, and now none of us had a job. And I can't imagine any of them were getting much more severance than me because it was still so new. If you can hear Riley playing with Nora. It was just awful pit of my stomach, and I was in shock, and I said to her, and I say something, I was like, okay, thanks for letting me know. I'm probably going to go home for a couple of hours, and I'll come back this evening and pack up my things, because I could feel myself on the verge of a breakdown, and I was not about to be in this corporate setting weeping. So I went back to my desk, got my bag. This is so vivid in my memory, grabbed that vase of flowers that my parents had sent to the office, and started walking out to the car. And I was trying to get in the car, and I was shaking like this, because I'm like, well, shoot, I just moved out here, and now I'm not gonna have an income. And I was so everything was flying through my head. Like, it was just chaos. I was so upset. And then I was like really angry at them. Not at my boss, because she didn't know. I asked her, I said, was the handwriting on the wall? And she's like, did you know that this was coming? And she said, I had no idea. I found out this morning. I'm so sorry. But the men who ran the company, there was the founder like inventor of the technology that we were selling, and then the CEO. And the two of them, I have a few choice words for them. I think they were running on fumes and they knew it, but they were trying to keep their investors. I just have some theories about that, and I have some words for them. Like, how dare you move me and many, 45 other people from their places on the premise that they will be getting a paid salary, relocating all of the expenses with relocating, moving into homes, buying homes, renting apartments, putting down money, etc. And then how dare you within just a couple of months be like, you know what? We actually aren't doing as well as we hoped I mean, I know that this is business, but it just, you know what? Business is slimy sometimes, and it was slimy. I just was really, the more space I've had from it, the more I'm like, giant eye rolls. So I got my vase, and I was shaking really bad, and I I was trying to get into my car, and I spilled the flower water all over myself because I was so shaky and so out of it. So I got into my car, and I sat there, and I remember just staring at the steering wheel and thinking, like, what is going on? And I was in the parking garage, and I tried to call my mom, and she didn't pick up. So then I called my dad, and he answered. And I was like, I just got laid off. And he was like, oh my gosh, you did. And like, I told him this story, and I don't even really remember that phone call. It wasn't that long. He was just very reassuring. He was like, you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Like, just, you need to go home, go spend time with Charlie. I don't even think Charlie had a name yet. Go spend time with your dog. And you need to go back and get your stuff and whatever. So I went home, and it was like the best to have a little puppy. And I just like snuggled him and cried and sobbed and cried and was angry. And I felt all kinds of feelings. And then it got to be, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I thought, before rush hour hits, I really need to go back to the office and clear out my cubicle because I was asked to do so. So I'll never forget this. I put Charlie in his crate, and I was only going to be gone for such a short time. I put Charlie in his crate, and I grabbed like a box, like they show in the movies, carrying your box of junk out of your cubicle. And I went in to get into the car, and I forgot something. I think I had forgotten my cell phone or something. So I ran back upstairs, and little cute Charlie's face was looking at me. And I thought, I'm taking Charlie with me. What are they going to do? Fire me? They just laid me off. And I worked in a very big, very corporate business office. And I walked in there with a puppy because I did not care. I'm like, try me. So I will never forget it. I just carried him in, and I was walking through the halls, and I had to go up the elevator and everything else. And all these super professional business people were walking by, and each one was like, the next one, just watching me walk in with this fuzzy little puppy. But I just didn't care. I'm like, I don't like any of you all. I understand that this is business, but this just sucks, and I'm annoyed, and I am in the worst mood, and I just don't care. So so that's what happened. So I went into my cube, and I had this puppy, and it ended up being like really, like therapy. That having the dog there was like just relief for everyone. And in fact, the CEO, I think I'm sure he had had a very stressful day having to field questions and concerns and anger and frustration from like 45 employees that he had to lay off. He laid on the floor in a full suit, and he was rolling around with Charlie on the floor. And then the other guy, the founder, walked by, and he was like, he was trying to be nice, but I just was sort of like, bump you. Like, he walked by, and he was like, I'm really sorry to have to do this, but it just seemed really insincere. And I mean, he could have been being sincere, but right, like I was not in the place to be gracious, but I was. In response, I was like, I understand it, it's just business. But in my head, I'm like, okay. So anyway, I pack up my cube. I didn't have that much stuff there. I had like a little, lamp and a few picture frames and whatever. I packed it up and just said goodbye and took Charlie with me and marched on my merry way. So that was on December 10th. So I got laid off on December 10th, and I got home and I texted some friends from church that I had met and said, here's what happened today. If you could please pray for me. I would love if you would pray for me. Because I'm just really stressed out and I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't want to have to move back home, and I only get 2 weeks. God is so good. So instantly, my friend, her name's Kala texted me back instantly and said, this is so crazy. There's a job opening at the church that I attended. There's a job opening at church that I think you would be perfect for. And just this morning, I was praying that God would open a door for you to be able to work in this position. And I was like, no way. So she's like, I'm going to connect you with the guy who would be your boss, who's doing the interviewing for this position. So she connects me with him, and through a series of phone conversations and through phone conversations and then in-person interviews, I was fully hired within 10 days. So December 10th, I got laid off. By December 20th, I had a full-time job. Tell me that isn't God. It was incredible. My coworkers from my previous job, who were so much more senior than me and had so many more contacts in Austin, many of them it took 3, 4, 5, 6 months to find a job. And here I was, the youngest, least experienced person, and I got a job within 10 days. It was awesome. And wouldn't you know, it worked out like this. I had my 2 weeks of severance, and the day I started getting paid at this church, I never went a day without getting paid. Like, it was, these 2 weeks were covered, and then I started getting paid for my new job. It was just the most incredible thing. So very shortly after, also it was really fun because I had this precious puppy and I got to be at home and literally be a stay-at-home dog mom. Because my job at Gateway was going to start, the church was called Gateway. My job at Gateway was going to start on, I actually think it was January 8th, which is funny because I started on July 8th at the other company. So I had like a little less than a month. So what I did was I spent like a week in Austin getting my job situated, and then I flew to Baltimore for an extended period of time for about 3 weeks with Charlie in tow to spend time with my family over the holidays and just to be there because it was more fun than being in Austin. But I knew I already had a job secured for when I returned, and it was just amazing. Well, during that time, I flew out to Baltimore and I was there. And during that time, on the 26th of December, my boyfriend, James, flew to Maryland to meet me and spend some time, with me and my family, my side of the family, over the Christmas break. And things got a little weird. He was acting just very weird. He was like really annoyed and like really jealous of Charlie and of the attention I was giving Charlie, but Charlie was a new puppy and he was like the bright, shiny, precious little thing. So friends and family were coming over to meet him, and puppies are a lot of work. And so I was spending a lot of time caring for Charlie, and he just was like, he just didn't like Charlie, and he like would kind of, and I'm like, listen here, if you don't like my dog, I don't really like you. Okay, that's like a little strong, but you know what I'm saying? It's like this precious puppy, and he just was like really annoyed with him all the time, and it just left a weird taste in my mouth. So that was going on, and with that, we had some weird conversations, and I just was like, I don't know what's going on with us. Like, I'm in a weird headspace because I just got laid off and then rehired, and I'm like shifting and all these kinds of things. I just, I'm not sleeping because I have to get up and let Charlie out 10 times and all the things. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Well, we fly back to Texas, like on the 28th or 9th or something, right before New Year's. And I went out to dinner. His parents said, we would love to take you guys out for a nice dinner for New Year's Eve. So on New Year's Eve, his parents and the two of us went out to a nice dinner, which was really sweet. And we enjoyed ourselves and we had a good night. But the whole time I had this sinking feeling like this is the last time like that I'm going to see, like this is, I just had this like closing ending feeling. But I just kept sweeping it off because it just seemed like on paper we were such a happy couple and we got along really well, and now I was living only 20 minutes away and he was about to graduate, in the next few months, and he would be moving back to, in with his parents, and we could like get engaged and get married, and like on paper it was perfect. But I just had this sinking feeling. So fast forward to the next day, it was New Year's Day, and I was taking down my Christmas tree in my apartment, and I start taking down the Christmas tree, and I have this sweeping feeling come over me. This is the only time in my life this has ever happened. This sweeping feeling come over me of disobedience to the Lord. I felt like God was saying, you need to break up with him. This relationship has run its course. It's time to end things. And you've had this gnawing feeling for a few months, and you're not obeying me and you're not listening to it, and you're just pushing forward. And then I started like physically, I like couldn't like pick up the ornaments, and it was just this like very weird spiritual experience where I feel like the Lord like literally stopped me in my tracks. And so I picked up the phone and called him and said, would you mind coming over to my apartment? I just want to have a conversation with you. So he drove over, and I just said, it was really short and sweet and cordial, and there weren't like no screaming or anything like that. I just said, like this relationship has meant a lot to me over the past, almost, 2.5, 3 years, but I just have a real sense that it's come to an end and that it's time for us to move on. And like, I'm really sad, and I said all this, and I'm really kind of confused by that, but I also I'm very sure of this. And he said, I've had some similar feelings, and so we just kind of left it. I mean, it couldn't have been, for a pretty long relationship, it couldn't have been more than a 30-minute conversation. And so we gave each other a hug and left, and that's literally the last time I ever saw him. So that was January 1st, and I always joke, New Year, new man, because I broke up with him on January 1st, and then I started my job on January 8th, and so everything had flipped. I was still in the same city, but now I had a dog for the first time in my life, a brand new career path, and I was no longer in this long-term relationship that I thought was going to be like a super long-term relationship. So it was wild. It was so wild. But I'm telling you, after I broke up with him, I was kind of sad that evening, and I woke up the next morning, and I am not kidding, I never cried one more tear about it. I didn't ruminate on it. And that's like my personality, is to overthink things. I just was at peace. God gave me this gift of just overwhelming joy and peace, and I felt light and happy. I didn't feel sad. I didn't think, what if? I didn't think, I'm never going to get married now. I didn't think, how am I going to meet someone? I just thought this was how it was meant to go. And I was like, it was amazing. Peace that surpasses all understanding, for sure. So I start working at the church. I start meeting great friends there, all this kind of stuff. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I am getting ready in the morning to go to work, and I have my laptop open, and a Facebook message pops up from Riley Lamb. And I think, Riley Lamb from camp is sending me a Facebook message? And it was at 9 a.m. And I'm like, this was a Monday morning. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'm like, the first thing he's doing on a Monday morning is sending me a Facebook message. So he was just like chatty, and he and I had never been close, but Riley and I had never been close, but we were friendly at camp. Everybody was friendly at camp, and I always thought he was really funny, but I didn't have a close relationship with him. Certainly there was no romantic involvement whatsoever. So he starts, chatting me up on Facebook, and we start chatting, and then he asks for my number, and we start texting. And over the course of the next month, we start really talking. And so finally one day and talking until 3 a.m. on the phone, just laughing and giggling, and just I felt like I was like a little kid. I just was who is this man? Like, he is so incredible. And he's just texting me and calling me, and we're talking just 24/7, talking all the time. So he asked me out on a date. Our first date was at the end of February. I think it was February 22nd. And he probably sent me that first Facebook message sometime around mid or late January. So about a month later, we went on our first, date in person. And we actually, Riley was living where we live now. So we were about 4 hours apart. So we actually drove and met in Waco and met halfway. Waco, like where Fixer Upper is. And we went out to coffee, and our first date lasted 9 hours. We went to coffee and we sat there for 2 or 3 hours, and then we went and got dinner for a few hours, and then we went to another coffee shop because we're just infatuated with each other, just instantly like had this connection, and just talked and talked and talked and laughed all day. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And I drove home that night and talked to my best friend on the phone, and I told her, I just met my husband. And I just knew instantly, like, we just had this connection, which is funny because I had met Riley a few years before, but we just were like friendly. We had never like talked one-on-one like this. And instantly I was like, you're like my soulmate. It was the weirdest thing. I just knew instantly. Well, eventually I asked Riley, why did you send me that Facebook message? And he's like, well, I always thought you were really nice at camp. And then, you posted pictures of Charlie, and Riley's such an animal lover. And he was like, and I just was like, so I started, reading your blog, and I just thought like, wow, this girl's really cool. And he's like, and then James texted me the day after you broke up with him, this long soppy text about how you broke up with him. And I was like, he did? Because Riley and James knew each other from camp, but they were not close friends. We just all knew each other because we had all been at that camp together. And Riley's like, yeah. And Riley's like, and if you know Riley from any of my videos, this is in character for him. He was like, so I took it as a dare. I felt like it was like, I dare you to ask her out. And I was like, I do not think that's what he intended. I think he wanted you to feel bad for him. But Riley's like, well, I liked you anyway. So I thought, I'll just ask you out on a date. Well, then we started talking, and the rest is history. So Riley and I went on our first date in February, and then he very, very shortly, like probably within another month or 6 weeks, it was clear that this was a very serious monogamous relationship. Neither of us were, dating other people or talking to other people. Neither of us were talking to other people from the second we started talking because we had such an instant connection. We started talking about marriage within a couple more months, and Riley asked for he took my parents out to coffee and asked for their permission to ask me to marry him in August. So, a few months later after the summer, and then we got engaged in December. So when I look at December, that was in December of 2014 that we got engaged. When I look at December of 2013, that I had a different job at the beginning, the December 1st of 2013, it's like I had a different job, I had a different boyfriend, I didn't have a dog, and all of this. And by the following December, I was engaged to the man of my dreams. I had this precious dog. I was in this job that I loved. I absolutely loved my job working at the church. I had the best coworkers. Everyone was young. They were all my age. We went out all the time and had fun. We did all kinds of, it was just so fun. I loved it. I had this amazing group of friends that I had built, and it was just like this complete 180 from one year to the next. And, it was just all the Lord. Like, it was just me walking in obedience and just being assured in God, and just being okay with the uncertainty of getting laid off and ending a very long-term relationship. And I just always think, like, what if I hadn't listened to that gnawing feeling that day in my apartment when I was trying to take down my Christmas tree? Like, what if I had just kind of forced that relationship and we had like gotten engaged and married, and I just would have missed out on so much. Like, I would have missed out on, that relationship was okay, but my relationship with Riley is like, it's like magical. Like, we fight and we are two normal people, but like, we are connected in a way I never was connected with this other guy. And we like get each other, and we're in love in a way that I never ever felt with this other guy. And I could have missed out on that. Like, it makes me sick to my stomach to think about. I'm just so grateful for things that things went down the way that they did. So then after Riley and I got married, I moved up here. We live in a small town, and I hated it with every fiber of my being at first, but it's almost been 5 years and I have come around. I still don't love it, but I've come around, and I love the life that we've built together and the flexibility that we have and the joy that we have. And we have a daughter together now, and this home that we get to have together. And like, I just, the past, when did I move here? I moved to Texas in July of 2013. So this year it will be 7 years that I've lived in Texas, and they have been the best 7 years of my life. They've been adventure years. They've been some of the hardest, grittiest, thinnest times, and some of the most amazing times, getting engaged and married and pregnant and having a baby and buying a house for the first time. And it's just been like the highest highs and the lowest lows, but the best 7 years, like the best journey. And I just am so in awe of it. Like, I look back and just think, like, if anything had been different, where would I be? But of course, you know, God had a plan and a story for my life, and He has one for you. And it's just really cool when you trust that and you just walk out, you know, the story that He has. And anyway, so that is my story of moving to Texas. It is a really special chapter of my life, and continues to be. And I don't know if we'll live here forever, but for now, this is the state that we live in, and this is where we are, and I'm really happy here. So that's the story. Good times. Would love to hear from you guys if you have any stories like that, or if you were in a long-term relationship and you ended it and then ended up meeting the partner of your dreams shortly thereafter, the way that I did, or anything like that. But thank you so much for listening to this long, rambly story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.